Hi, welcome to the December 14th meeting of the CNCF IoT Edge Working Group. On the agenda today, we've got an item to discuss and brainstorm a CFP proposal for KubeCon Europe, followed by just general discussion. And I do want to call out that we had a poll that we started at the last meeting just to see what people's preferences were for holding meetings during the holiday periods found around year beginning and end of year. So we will not have the meeting that would ordinarily take place on December 28th, I think it was, but we will resume meetings on January 11th. So with that said, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Dan, you were the one who suggested brainstorming the CFPs for Europe, and I think you are based in the area, so maybe we'll deem you an authority on the subject. Do you want to start discussion of that?
Yeah, sure. So that was just that I noted that we got asked as a working group to submit a CFP. So I was wondering, anybody have any ideas around it? References? I think if
maybe you can refresh my memory and tell people where and when this is too.
So the KubeCon EU is in Amsterdam. Let me see. Yeah, Amsterdam in April 17th till 21st.
Okay.
And first thing I'm not sure is that I know that the process was changed the last time, right? So that we need to provide a CFP under the tag runtime, right? So we're not guaranteed the.
Yeah, I think they've changed. It used to be pretty much that SIGs and working groups that applied were guaranteed a slot, but now it's become competitive. So perhaps as a program committee reviewer, I think in some instances in the old days, people sort of mailed in proposals, but now I think that you perhaps have to invest a little more in outlaying a plan and content and kind of selling the reason as to why the world would be a better place with these sessions. So, you know, I don't think we really mailed in any of our proposals before anyway, that we did a pretty good job on outlining what it was going to be about and why, you know, why it was merited, but just throwing that out there. I think the other thing that this is just my personal observation on these meetings being a success in terms of attendance and audience participation and networking would be that if we can perhaps engage people from the region that are actually users as opposed to vendors, that there's an argument to be made that that would actually be an ad if we're going out there with a talk. Just having, say, leadership of this SIG being there is an option, but if we can perhaps recruit somebody actually using the edge native technologies, I think that adds attractiveness to the session.
Yeah, I agree.
And in terms of a subject, I think having put together these things before, just the broad.
Sorry.
Oops. Are you having trouble hearing me?
Yeah, sorry, my phone rang, then my headphones connected, so I didn't hear.
I think that based on my own experience, and you know, I've been either at these or spoken at them for years now, that going too broad, like if you just announce this as the general overall topic of edge native, that it doesn't ring with somebody, and then that having it focus on some niche of edge native might help build a more compelling presentation and maybe even draw audience, because there are some people who are there just for the general overall thing. But I think that at this point, Edge has been out there for a number of years, and that there are a fair number of people looking for the deeper dive. And as long as you call out what your focus is about, even the newbies can appreciate the value of kind of a deeper dive into one niche of the edge native topic, as long as you call out, what it is, and that it be something that essentially everybody trying to pursue an edge native use case would be interested in. So throwing out the idea that maybe focusing on one aspect of it would be a good way to go.
So first, I completely agree about if you have like a local user and user of technology, that would be great. So if anybody knows anyone we can join, that would be awesome. And the other thing, so the only topic that I have in my mind that we can cover is that on the last KubeCon we had the Edge native principles. So maybe this time we can do something like Edge native principles in practice. So having a small demo of putting it all working together. So I have something that I could prepare for that. So basically, I don't know, running a Bluetooth mesh gateway as a service on the edge, managed by Open Cluster Management, running on a like a microshift or one of edge cluster, and talking about I don't know, edge metrics with Prometheus Edge agent and things like that. So just putting all those principles tied to some actual use case and how that can be done. So
okay, how about if we I don't even know the exact date. I know it's in January, and I recollect maybe it's in mid-January, but maybe we can either drop this right in our agenda notes document or put a link to some secondary one where we'll go through a phase, say for the next 2 weeks, where anybody who has an idea for a topic, just drop it in there and flesh out whatever you can. And also maybe in that section, we can have volunteers who think if you want to be part of a presentation or a panel, put your name down in there, and we'll leave it sort of in an async brainstorm mode for a couple of weeks, and then revisit it unless people have more comments to say right here and now in the meeting.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Dehan shared in the chat here that the CFPs due January 27th, and I put that in the meeting notes. I think adding some ideas would be great. And I think another idea would just be to do a panel itself. And that could be also led by our Edge native principles, but ask some experts from various parts of Edge within our working group to sit on a panel and kind of just go through and ask questions about how they're managing and their pain points. So that's another option there. But I like the idea of just pulling the group. And then when we meet back beginning of January, going with something.
Yeah, the other thing I'll throw out there is that they will, even though the CFPs aren't open yet, I've been told that they're planning another Kubernetes on the Edge Day event at KubeCon Europe as well. So that will be a full day of sessions. And one consideration is whatever would be put on, whether it would be better for the day-long event or for the general thing associated with our working group.
Yeah, I think also that makes sense. Once we have a CFPs for the Kubernetes on Edge Day, maybe we can see some of the sessions that or proposals that would fit better for the main event and
Yeah, I don't think those are likely to come in time for when we have to
Yeah.
propose our maintainer track session though. So we'll, you know, we'll have to just take a guess as to what those are about.
Yeah.
Okay, unless
But
anybody
I
else
like-
has,
I like the idea that let's keep in the agenda notes open for the ideas and collect them over the holiday season. And
Okay.
everybody is in the rest mode, so maybe they'll come more inspiration, right?
okay, that sounds good. Anybody else on this topic of the maintainer track session? Otherwise, we'll just move into birds of a feather because I didn't see anything else nominated on the agenda.
One more thing is that I think our meeting in January is 25th, so it's just 2 days before the deadline. So maybe we can sync back a little bit earlier and see maybe we can do one-off meeting to discuss only this topic.
Okay,
January.
that sounds good.
Great.
Okay, we'll go into birds of a feather mode. I'll just open it up to anyone who has come across wants to talk about anything or has seen anything interesting. I'm kind of curious. I normally have found good sessions at the Amazon reInvent event around this time of year, but I wasn't able to go physically or even watch any of them live real time. But wondering if anybody else caught anything interesting at that conference. I am told that the attendance was really high, that it was a sellout in terms of what they had allocated for attendance. And like I say, Amazon has been reaching out into the edge space. So they've actually historically had some pretty interesting sessions there. I'm just wondering if anybody caught any this year. Sounds like no, but I'm personally intending to go look over whatever they might have available in recording. So maybe I'll bring it up at an upcoming meeting. Anything else people have come across? I did come across an interesting, I don't know, maybe halfway to a promo video, but it was interesting of a use case for agriculture, automating operations at a fish farming operation in Asia. And they had this thing set up intentionally so that it was the default operating condition was that it was not connected, that this the opportunity here was that they had a fish farm out in a rural area and a feeder appliance that broadcast fish food into these ponds, almost like, you know, a sprinkler system that you'd find in agriculture. And it was automated and it didn't have internet connectivity. So that the way that they drove application updates, collection of data and feedback was that someone would go out there into this rural area with a cell phone and connect to the equipment from cell phone to the equipment, perhaps deliver updates, collect the data, and it would be copied into the cell phone, not even assuming that you had internet connectivity out at this spot, even if you brought a cell phone there. And then when the person came back to a more metro area with connectivity, it would connect up to, let's call it cloud hosted management. But it was really an interesting kind of extreme use case of intermittent connectivity. And I think that it provoked thoughts in my mind that if you could build an architecture that could handle that kind of case, you could still use it in one better connected, but perhaps going the other direction where you start with the assumption of architecting something for more or less continuous permanent connectivity has great difficulties in transitioning to kind of that more challenging edge use case. Anyway, I'll find a link to it and I'll drop it in the chat because I thought it's a YouTube video presentation that lasts about 30 minutes. And I found that it was both interesting and then caused me to think about, other aspects of designing an edge native system.
Kind of moving into a different discussion, I'm curious for folks here. We moved from being a Kubernetes working group to being a CNCF one. And I'm curious if people, when they think of edge in the cloud, if they think Kubernetes, or how much people are starting to not think Kubernetes for folks here, and how tied those discussions you think are.
So my recent experience is both. So still containers, but for example, what we were experiencing is that we were mixing Podman and one node Kubernetes microsheets on different boxes, depending on the resources and things like that. And for a lot of use cases, like a systemd and Podman works just fine, but it's harder to. I don't see a tool yet for managing all that from a single place. So a more larger deployments would still be problematic.
I agree. Yeah. We have been working on like a POC, actually developed application using like Kubernetes, KubeEdge, and OpenEarth. So we have not decided yet, but so far nothing perfect. That's why we are trying to make contribution back to the mainline. But I think that using Kubernetes mainline for the edge IoT devices, it's too much. We have to pay many taxes, right? So
you're using
sorry.
Are you using both KubeEdge and OpenEarth, or you're deciding between the two? So you're kind of playing around with both.
Yeah, so we actually did develop the application like live streaming, reconfigure the data pipeline using OpenEarth, KubeEdge, and Kubernetes to compare the performance and this kind of stuff. And most likely for the system architecture that we can use for our use cases, such as like entertainment, music, this kind of stuff. So we haven't done this, like we didn't make decision yet. So we are still like open to get more information, but we are just trying to find what's missing for us. So if we find something, we try to make a contribution back to the mainline. So by the way, I got the invitation from Alibaba, from OpenEarth member, to have the presentation for next January in Indonesia. Yeah,
that would be great. Thanks.
The quick question. So during the other conference, can I introduce this working group?
Sure.
Okay. I think it would be nice if we have more people. That means more information and the use cases to share. So I think that makes sense to me.
I think what you can find, we have decks that we've presented at the KubeCon events that have summary pages with the links to where to join the group and things. And you're welcome to just cut and paste those things if
Okay,
you're
got
going
it.
to present.
That
it
would be
in
helpful.
Yeah. So we generally publish them on the KubeCon site in that SCED platform, and they get published there as PDFs. But if you want them as a PowerPoint or a Google Slides deck, let us know. And I think we generally compose them, in those platforms too. So I didn't prepare the last deck. Kate, maybe was it you, or I don't know who owned the deck that went on there. But I've got some of the older ones, like from, KubeCon Europe. So I know I've got some of those, and they don't change that often. However, they did change pretty dramatically when we transitioned to the CNCF. So how about if you reach out to us if you want kind of a summary deck on this group?
Yeah, also the meeting notes, everything at the top is always up to date, and that's what the summary slide is. Our summary slide's not that pretty anyways, but I'm happy to send you the one we used for the past KubeCon.
Okay, sounds great.
Is this session both physically live and online, or is it just a physical conference?
That's in person, like
Okay.
Developer conference. I posted a URL in chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I asked just because if it was online, I might watch, but I doubt that I'd get my employer to send me to Indonesia. It looks interesting though. It's actually kind of interesting to me. I'm looking at the conference on the open source projects they call out. And it's kind of interesting that there's a group of these that seem popular in North America, Europe, and the ones coming out of Asia seem to not get as much traction and visibility over here. And that maybe some of it is languages and people not presenting on these at different conferences, but a bunch of those project names I saw there are things I'm not familiar with. And it maybe calls out an opportunity for better cross-pollination across different regions in the world to build awareness of some of these open source projects. If you come across anybody there, by the way, who is associated with these projects and wants to present at our group meetings, please throw that offer out there, because I think that we tend to get better attendance when we get presenters on particular projects, especially sometimes the attendance isn't great if we can't announce it, a month or more in advance, but this would help address that situation where I think sometimes the Asian initiated projects aren't that well known in North America and Europe, and vice versa, perhaps. Anybody else got any topics they wanted to discuss? Rob, I don't think we've heard from you for a while. What's going on at Wind River these days, or anything interesting you've come across?
Specifically with Kubernetes at the edge?
Yeah, or
I think,
broader than Kubernetes, if you like.
I think where my head's been at is going back to Kate's question of how do people want to use Kubernetes at the edge? And I think for some of these edge devices, it might not take advantage of all the parts of Kubernetes. Like you may not want to have a virtual overlay network across all the devices. So then the value of Kubernetes comes down to the Kube API server. So I've been mulling over how can you take advantage of the Kube API server so you can use it as a common control interface for these far edge devices.
Yeah, I think that what we've been seeing is that exactly what you said, where the value is having it be something that would host kind of your own custom APIs that you could plug in as CRDs to manage things at edge. And then there are some existing open source projects that kind of do that for particular things like doing an API related to device twins and things. A broader thing that has come up over and over again in the past year, I think, is even aspects of things that are below the waterline surface for Kubernetes, like managing the OS and the container runtime that has to exist kind of as a base platform for Kubernetes itself, managing those at scale at edge and keeping the things updated. Beyond, I think some of the aspects that have been going on at Red Hat are kind of related to that, right? Specialized things going on in container runtime and operating system level, because if you look at the big picture of what you're facing with as an organization deploying at scale out at the edge, Kubernetes is just kind of it might be an attractive part of the solution, but there are a lot more components that you need to worry about.
Yeah, and I think one really interesting use case is trying to get to the really small devices. So writing CRDs so that you can upgrade microcontrollers using entirely new payloads with MCU boot to flash a new payload onto the microcontroller, or using a proxy to send messages to devices running an RTOS to download a new payload, a new application to that RTOS. Those are both things that we've done. So it's not hypothetical, but it really extends Kubernetes to that last inch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those things are probably perhaps not even running a Linux-based OS. And I think in some aspects, some of them don't even support IP network connectivity, so that you get into the additional challenge of having to do communications gateways or transitions, right? In order to update applications and the base platform at those, you have to get the bits over there. And some of the traditional cloud native aspects of Kubernetes kind of assume that you'd have very good high bandwidth network connectivity, all based on IP, and at edge that isn't going on necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. Like with the Zephyr MCU example, it was over Bluetooth, and I don't think there was an IP stack there. I think we were talking directly with GATT messages back and forth.
We have a similar project in the demo in the Rogue world, but yeah, in that case, that edge workload that updater is basically an agent running as a edge application, right? On some edge node and communicating with the near field devices, or yeah, over the Bluetooth and updating things over the air. But in that case, yeah, we have that case of how we deploy this and manage this gateway, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities for people coming up with and sharing techniques for doing those kinds of gateways too, because I sometimes run across people who stumble upon things to convert from one protocol to another. You know, some of a popular thing at these edge devices is something, I don't know, MQTT comes up a fair amount of the time, but you'll then often run into people who go with containers and try to take one microservice that was really made for running in a Docker container, commingle it with things that were more edge centric using edge MQTT, and then try to get an overlay network going that is going to work to manage the traffic for both of those, and it can present challenges. I see a name on the list here, Jess, who I'm not familiar with. Maybe if you're new to the group, you could introduce yourself.
Sure, yeah. I jumped into this a few weeks ago because I'm currently working on a edge deployment platform for a company who's doing AI at the edge. So we're focused primarily on shipping ML models and updates to ML models, new weights files and things like that, along with AI pipelines down to edge devices, and primarily focusing around video streaming. So that's actually a question I was going to pose to the group. If you guys had any familiarity with the different technologies to stream video amongst edge applications and also from edge to cloud. Usually with edge, you're talking, like you said, about MQTT or RabbitMQ or some of these other messaging protocols to get the information up to a central cloud location. But with video, obviously, those aren't the best technologies to use. And you see RTSP and a few different protocols like SRT on the edge, but it can be tricky to transcode those and actually do work with them. So I was curious if anybody had any familiarity with working with video on edge devices, any anecdotes to share.
I guess I'm curious in that scenario for the ML processing, is that what are you pushing up to the cloud versus what are you processing on the edge? And in part because, for example, with RTSP, is that stream just going to the local edge node, which has the ML application, or are you doing something where this is like a smart IP camera that can actually hold a model itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are a few smart cameras coming out recently. We're more focused on putting a gateway near the camera on the edge, reading the RTSP stream off the camera, and then doing that AI inference there at the edge device. But that said, there are a lot of situations where customers may want to see that live RTSP stream, either for debugging or to get some training data or to even just position the camera. And so being able to stream that video back, at least sometimes, can be really useful. And so we've been looking at basically repackaging that video either into SRT or WebRTC to actually do the streaming back to the cloud in those situations. But there's still a bit of an open question. I can't say I'm, extremely well versed with video. So, but it does seem to be something that's really common on the edge, right? It seems like a lot of different edge devices want to do video. So, at least from my perspective.
That's interesting. So you're caching the stream essentially and packaging it up and then sending it in the case where people want to see that live stream and debug it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's one of the use cases. And we want to be able to do multiplexing of the video, right? We want to be able to stream it both to an AI model through inference and then also to the cloud if somebody wants to see it for debugging or some other reason. And maybe even, when you have that functionality built in, you could start looking at doing blue-green deployments where you could run two models side by side on the same stream and see if the inference compares or differs in some way for testing. So there's a lot of really interesting things you do with Kubernetes on the edge, as long as you have, the hardware that can support it.
Yeah, from what I've heard, that case of streaming, certainly you digest it with AI machine learning at the edge location. And from what I've heard, the common scenario there is that you don't stream frame by frame up to a higher level cloud just because of the bandwidth challenges. And what you do is perhaps if you need to train a model for spotting interesting things like identifying people's faces or car license plates or just the fact that somebody entered an area, You might temporarily stream frame by frame up for training in a public cloud where you've got access to more comprehensive hardware for doing the training set analysis. But then after training, put your model back down on the edge site and have the model spot anomalies or things of interest. And then you only stream deductions based on the frame by frame video. And if they find something interesting, maybe you'll selectively take some frames up to the public cloud, but try to reduce the bandwidth that is making that transition all the way up to the public cloud. I've even seen some allegations that doing AI up in the public cloud and just sending raw video is arguably even wasteful from an energy perspective, in that, you know, you start doing 60 frame a second 4K video, that's a lot of bandwidth, and it transitions into energy burn as these things get moved up to the cloud. There are interesting things going about even in the hardware perspective too, where, you know, initially some of these things were done on the big NVIDIA engines and the Google TPUs that ran in a central cloud. But there's been a lot of activity on the semiconductor front of coming up with lower power devices that accelerate AI ML workloads out at edge that are both cheaper and lower power consumption. I produced a link that I found interesting on a video about the challenges of edge AI related to hardware. And I think maybe the trend is to move some of that analysis out towards the edge to do massive amounts of data reduction, you know, by massive amounts, you know, 1,000 to 1 or better, only sending what you need. The other thing is, if your app is specifically video, and Kate can maybe talk a little bit more about this, but there are things out there that would discover cameras and try to manage them at scale and, you know, keep
Yeah,
them
I
updated.
remember, I think the first week I was here, I heard Kate was a contributor to Acri, is that right? And that was one of the projects we were really interested in because it made discovery of cameras so easy. So that was really awesome to hear. And completely agree with you. And that's exactly what we're looking at, is this idea of we could do inference at the edge, send the inference results out via AMQP is what we're looking at, to a cloud to then do reporting on and show and do, you know, a single pane of glass to give you information. And it's a really powerful concept, but it tends to be a bit tricky. And I completely agree with you too, that NVIDIA seems to have held a bit of a monopoly in this space for a long time, but that's been really changing. I assume that's what you meant, because we've been talking to Intel a bit, and with OpenVINO, it seems like that's a really powerful project to help kind of use different alternative silicon, basically from a standard NVIDIA GPU. So I don't know if anybody here has a lot of experience with OpenVINO. I was digging into it, but I'm not too far yet.
Hey, Jess, I just put the URL. So we are trying to use SRT, including statistics using Prometheus. You can see the diagram. So yeah, we actually control the entire fleet using Kubernetes.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, and it sounded like you guys.
So yeah, besides, we are trying to open source SRT exporter for the statistics, so that we can get all the statistics for the each endpoint, and we can adjust the parameter to each endpoint. So that's what we are trying to do.
Very cool. I'll have to dig into this GitHub a bit more. Thank you.
Yeah. So we don't know the number of the senders. So for our use case, so once the sender device comes online, we are taking advantage of the daemon set to just let the Kubernetes to start to deploy the application, senders application for each senders. And that the service will be discovered by QoS orchestration. and create the receiver on the cloud to get the like stream from edge to cloud, and distribute live streaming for everyone. That's kind of like a POC. I cannot disclose any more information now, but that's what we are trying to do.
Got you. Do you have any work around streaming between two different apps on an edge device? Say you had one app that was doing some AI on it, and then a second app that was doing pre-processing on that video for it. Could you use this to stream between those two containers, or?
No, we are just trying to like set up a live streaming experience, so we don't have like an AI application running in Edge in this particular use case. Yeah.
Could you just set up essentially a gRPC endpoint for the pre-processing app? So essentially, the pre-processing app connects to the RTSP stream. It opens up some sort of gRPC service that the next, maybe that's the inferencing app does the next step on, or are you looking for maybe something more lightweight and native than that?
I was looking for something a bit more centralized, I guess, where there would be some sort of service discovery and agreement between the two apps based off of the encoding and how to fetch the video. With gRPC, one app would then connect to the next in the stream, which is probably fine if you had a central discovery service. But ideally, it would go through a broker, whether that's just for proxying or like an actual message queue. I'm not sure. But it seems like if you were doing a message queue, you'd want to, like Steve was saying, just send images or frames through the message queue. But then you lose a lot of the benefits of, an encoding like H.264 for reducing the size of the stream. So I think you're right, and I was digging into something like gRPC, but it would be more complicated to have to tell one app where the other app is, basically, when they're both deployed.
I think one way to do that would be just in a Kubernetes native experience would be to have services. So that if that gRPC service is behind a Kubernetes service, the other app could just request the Kubernetes service of the gRPC endpoint would be what I'm expecting, but I'm sure I'm missing something there, but we've done that at least with Akri with demos where you can connect to kind of a broker of sorts that is an app that is, it is representing the device in a way. It's gathering all the stream from the device and it just has a Kubernetes service in front of it. So then a final application can just point to the service or it can point to one service that connects to all of various set of brokers for aggregating all the streams. I don't know if that's the model you're looking for, but that's one thing we looked at.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I would love to pick your brain a bit more about it at some point, if you don't mind.
Of course, I'll send you some information about that too, or put it in the chat.
Awesome, thanks. But yeah, I've been really enjoying these meetings, so I appreciate you guys making them open like you have been. It's nice to just be able to jump on and be a fly on the wall.
We've got about 15 minutes left. Anybody else got anything they want to bring up? If not, we can just end the meeting a little bit early, but forum is open to any topics. If somebody's got anything. Okay, well, then let's make this, let's end this last session of the year because the next one will be canceled and we'll see you all in January. Bye and thanks for attending.
Take care, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.
Thanks all.